Hi everybody, welcome to another video. Today we'll be talking about the history of GMO, and as mentioned last time, we'll be looking at Australia's response to GMO, as well as the social and ethical concerns we have as citizens of this world, in addition to some famous stories. But remember, as always, like and subscribe. Now, let's get on with it. Before we talk about the present, let's look back and see how it all happened. When looking at the history, two dates stand out. The year 1935, when Russian scientist Andrei Nikolaevich isolates pure DNA, and 1973, the year recombinant DNA was created. With the ability now to bring together genetic material from multiple sources, the idea of genetically modified organisms took off. By the 1980s, the first GMO patent was issued by the US Supreme Court. In 1982, the first consumer GMO product developed approved by the FDA. And because of that, during 1986 to 1992, the FDA put policies in place to regulate use of GMO in agriculture to ensure that it will be utilized safely. The first wave of GMO produce hit the market in the 1990s. The produce made available to consumers was summer squash, soybeans, cotton, corn, papayas, tomatoes, potatoes, and canola. But another major breakthrough happened in 2015, as the FDA finally approved the first salmon GMO, being the first animal product to do so. By today, genetically modified foods can be found in most supermarkets around the world. So next time you're out shopping, keep an eye open for the products in your supermarket. So how has Australia reacted to this? Well, let's just say we're a bit more strict in the regulation of genetically modified food. In Australia, some of the other approved genetically modified foods now include wheat, soybeans, corn, and sugar beets. But there are also genetically modified products that come from overseas: chocolate, potato chips, margarine, and even breakfast cereals. But most Australian-grown genetically modified crops are used as animal feed. The Office of Gene Technology Regulation, or OGTR, is the office that oversees all of the GMO in Australia, but they do not directly regulate them, as this is often done by other organisations, allowing for more specific regulations. The OGTR is set by the Gene Technology Act of 2000, which also covers work in contaminant and environmental releases. The organisations that regulate genetic modification include Food Standards Australia New Zealand, the Australian Pesticide and Veterinary Medicines Authority, Therapeutic Goods Administration, and National Industrial Chemicals Notification and Assessment Scheme. They help keep an eye on genetically modified organisms and genetically modified foods so that we are able to enjoy them. Let's take a closer look at Food Standards Australia and New Zealand, as all products involving GMO have to follow its rules and regulations. Food Standards Australia and New Zealand is an independent statutory authority established by the Food Standards Australia and New Zealand Act of 1991 and is enforced by all states, territories, and within New Zealand. They play an important role as they oversee the application of genetically modified organism cultivation in a case-by-case situation. In the Food Standard Code, Standard 152 talks about the regulation of using gene technology in it. It details the mandatory pre-market approval, which includes a food safety assessment and mandatory labeling requirements, so that consumers like us are able to easily identify our food. Let's take a closer look at each criteria for the mandatory pre-market approval. There is a food safety assessment test, which is made up of 5 parts. Firstly, an analysis is undertaken to determine the nutritional content. Then, the toxicity of GM products, and it's compared to its conventional counterpart. For the novel food to pass, it must be as safe and nutritious as its traditional counterpart. Thirdly, tests are conducted to determine the potential for allergenic reactions in the new foods compared to the original. Then looking at the stability of the inserted gene, whether it is consistent over a number of generations. Lastly, to look at any other unintended effects of the gene insertion. A detailed report on the safety assessment is compiled. If approved, appropriate regulations are applied. Regulations also apply to imported food products. But what about labeling? Well, it's a bit tricky, as there are some areas where no labeling is required. To clear this up, let's look at the mandatory labeling, as it focuses on the criteria for GM labeling. Companies are required to identify GM ingredients if 1. The final product contains GM ingredient. 2. GM contains potential allergens. 3. The GM ingredient is derived from animal products. 4. There is a difference in nutritional profile and/or natural toxin levels. But companies are not required to identify GM ingredients if 1. The product is a highly processed food where the processing removes all DNA and/or protein. 2. GM food additives or processing aids don't remain in the product at detectable levels. 3. GM flavors are in concentrations no more than 1 gram per kilogram in the food. 4. GM ingredients unintentionally are present at no more than 10 grams per kilogram per ingredient. 5. Food is prepared at the point of sale. So, what are the social and ethical concerns? Social concerns include the source of the genus used in plant food. Are they animal-derived? If they are, it excludes part of the population, vegans, vegetarians, and religious groups, avoiding specific animal products. There is concern for the welfare of animals genetically engineered to produce more growth hormone. Ethical concerns include the impact GM crops will have on traditional farming practices. With each new GMO seed developed, there is concern companies will patent the crop and dominate the world plant food production. There is also the potential for patenting living organisms. With all these rules and regulations, why use GMO at all? Well, maybe these examples will give you a better idea. Have you heard of golden rice before? It was a really innovative idea to combat the vitamin A deficiency happening in the world, especially in developing countries within Asia, as without vitamin A, it can lead to the loss of sight and death. So they made a rice strand with DNA from maize or corn to produce beta-carotene, so that the body is able to metabolize it into vitamin A. Even though there was a lot of backlash, over time people have become more understanding, and currently Bangladesh is performing field trials so that it is widely available to the people who are most in need. But one of the most successful stories of GMO foods happened in 1945, after Hawaii recorded the first papaya ring spot virus. Through many years of research, they were able to develop a new variety of papaya by inserting a genetic sequence into it, which originated from the virus, to develop a resistance. The new varieties, which are widely consumed, are called Sun Up and Rainbow variety. Since then, there has been no ill effect noted and is safe to consume. The last example might be the most unique, as we enter changing the DNA of animals. This story begins with the AquAdvantage Atlantic salmon. The purpose of this was to provide a sustainable way to feed the growing population. They did this by inserting a growth hormone promoter gene from Chinook salmon and Terminator from ocean pound, so that it doesn't overgrow. This means salmon will mature in 18 months instead of 3 years, which is what most Atlantic salmon need. But especially with GM animals, the fear of interspecies reproduction is a major concern. So they made all the salmon female and sterile. Well, we've covered a lot in this series on GMO. Hopefully, we've been able to inform you a bit more about this technology and how it's going to impact the world we live in. And remember, if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and click the bell icon to know when we release more interesting videos. Bye for now, and stay tuned till the next time.